Introduction. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share with you one of the most incredible transformations in entertainment history, a story that seems almost impossible to believe. Imagine this. The man behind one of the most recognizable and powerful voices in Hollywood, the voice of Darth Vader and Mufasa, spent nearly a decade of his childhood in almost complete silence. Yes, I'm talking about James Earl Jones, who suffered from such severe stuttering as a child that he barely spoke a word for 8 years. This is the shocking true story of how a virtually mute child transformed into the owner of perhaps the most commanding voice in cinema history. The silent years. James Earl Jones was born in Arca Butler, Mississippi, on January 17, 1931. His early childhood took a dramatic turn when, at just 5 years old, he developed a debilitating stutter that would silence him for nearly a decade. The severity of his condition is difficult to comprehend. This wasn't just occasional stumbling over words. Jones' stutter was so extreme that he found it almost impossible to communicate verbally at all. From age 5 until 13, he chose near-total silence over the tremendous anxiety and embarrassment his speech impediment caused him. Jones himself has described this period saying, "I was a stutterer. I couldn't talk. So my first year of school was my first mute year, and then those mute years continued until I got to high school." Can you imagine that? The future voice of Darth Vader, a deep, resonant voice that would command the Death Star, couldn't even speak to his classmates or teachers. The disconnect between the silent child and the vocal powerhouse he would become is genuinely astounding. His stuttering wasn't just a minor inconvenience, it shaped his entire identity during those formative years. Jones has shared that he became so self-conscious about his speech that he avoided talking altogether. He would communicate through nodding, gestures, or writing notes. In school, teachers eventually stopped calling on him, and many even mistakenly believed he might have learning disabilities. What makes this even more poignant is the fact that Jones' father, Robert Earl Jones, was himself an actor and had a career that required eloquent speech. The contrast between father and son must have been stark. A professional communicator with a son who couldn't verbalize his thoughts without extreme difficulty. The turning point. So how does a child who can barely speak transform into one of the most celebrated voices in entertainment history? The turning point came thanks to an extraordinary high school English teacher named Donald Crouch. Jones describes Crouch as the father of my voice. This teacher noticed something special in the quiet teenager, that beneath his silence lay a keen intelligence and sensitivity that was struggling to find expression. One day, Jones wrote a poem that caught Crouch's attention. Impressed by the young man's writing, Crouch suspected that Jones wasn't speaking not because he couldn't think clearly, but because of his stutter. In what would prove to be a life-changing moment, Crouch challenged Jones to prove that he had written the poem himself by reciting it aloud in front of the class. As Jones later recalled, he said, "You didn't write this poem." I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "No, you didn't. If you wrote this poem, you could read it aloud to the class." And because of a solid sense of myself as a writer even then, I said, "I will read this poem to the class." And I did. And I didn't stutter when I read that poem. This breakthrough was nothing short of miraculous. When reciting his own words, focused on the rhythm and meaning, rather than his speech, Jones found he could speak without stuttering. This discovery opened a door that had been firmly shut for 8 years. Crouch continued to encourage Jones, having him recite passages from great works of literature and eventually memorize complex Shakespearean monologues. Through these exercises, Jones gradually gained confidence in his speaking abilities and began to develop control over his stutter. The transformation, what happened next, is truly remarkable. After discovering he could speak fluently when reciting poetry, Jones began a dedicated practice of reading aloud daily. He would recite poetry, Shakespeare, and various texts, training his voice like an athlete trains their muscles. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It took years of dedicated practice for Jones to gain full control over his speech, but his commitment was unwavering. He has described how he would read to the wind, to the fields, to the trees, anything that wouldn't judge him if he stumbled over his words. Jones attended the University of Michigan, initially planning to study medicine. However, his growing comfort with public speaking and his natural talent for performance eventually led him toward acting. Still, it's important to note that Jones didn't completely cure his stutter. Rather, he learned to manage it effectively. Even today, he acknowledges that his stutter can return in moments of extreme stress or fatigue. What's particularly fascinating is how Jones's early struggles with speech actually informed and enhanced his later vocal performances. Having spent years analyzing the mechanics of speech, he developed an incredible awareness of how to use his voice for maximum impact. The deliberate, measured cadence that makes his voice so distinctive and authoritative may well be a direct result of his conscious control over his speech patterns. The iconic voice emerges. The rest, as they say, is history. Jones went on to become one of the most respected actors in American theater, film, and television. His voice, once trapped by stuttering, would become his greatest asset. Consider the supreme irony. The man who was once nearly mute provided the voice for one of cinema's most quotable villains. When Darth Vader declares, "I am your father," it's with the commanding voice of someone who once couldn't say his own name without stumbling. As Mufasa in The Lion King, Jones brought gravitas and emotional depth to lines like "Remember who you are." The resonance in those words carried extra significance coming from a man who had to rediscover his own voice. His voice work extends far beyond these iconic roles. For years, his deep baritone delivered CNN's tagline, "This is CNN," and he's narrated countless documentaries, commercials, and programs. The voice that was once silenced has become one of the most heard and recognized in the world. Continuing struggles and advocacy. It would be misleading to portray Jones's story as a simple happily ever after. The reality is more nuanced. Throughout his career, Jones has continued to manage his stutter. In interviews, he's spoken about how he still occasionally struggles with certain words or sounds, particularly when tired or under pressure. During a Broadway performance in 1966, Jones experienced a severe return of his stutter that nearly derailed the show. He managed to complete his performance through sheer determination, but the incident served as a reminder that his speech challenges weren't entirely in the past. What's admirable is how open Jones has been about his struggles. Rather than hiding his history with stuttering, he's become an advocate for others with speech impediments. He's worked with organizations like the Stuttering Foundation and frequently speaks to young people facing similar challenges. Jones once remarked, "One of the hardest things in life is having words in your heart that you can't utter." This profound statement reveals how deeply his early experiences affected him, and how keenly he understands the frustration of being unable to express oneself. Other notable figures with similar struggles. Jones isn't the only public figure to overcome a severe stutter. King George VI, whose struggle was portrayed in the King's Speech, famously battled a debilitating stutter while ruling during World War II. Like Jones, he worked with specialists to develop techniques to manage his speech. More recently, President Joe Biden has spoken openly about his childhood stutter and how he overcame it by reciting poetry in front of a mirror, a technique remarkably similar to Jones's own practice. Other actors like Bruce Willis, Samuel L. Jackson, and Emily Blunt have all struggled with stuttering to varying degrees. Each found their own path to managing their speech, often through performance itself. What sets Jones's story apart, however, is the extreme severity of his condition, to the point of elective mutism for nearly a decade, and the incredible contrast between that silent child and the commanding vocal presence he would become. The legacy and lessons. James Earl Jones's journey from silence to becoming one of the world's most distinctive voices carries powerful lessons that extend far beyond entertainment. First, it reminds us that our greatest strengths sometimes emerge from our deepest struggles. Jones didn't succeed despite his stutter. In many ways, he succeeded because of it. The meticulous attention to speech that his condition forced upon him contributed to the exceptional vocal control that would later define his career. Second, his story highlights the transformative power of a single supportive individual. Without Donald Crouch's intervention, Jones might never have discovered his ability to speak fluently through performance. This underscores how profoundly teachers can impact their students' lives. Finally, Jones's willingness to discuss his speech challenges openly has helped destigmatize stuttering and inspired countless others facing similar obstacles. By sharing his vulnerability, he's demonstrated true strength. Conclusion. The journey of James Earl Jones from a virtually silent child to the owner of one of Hollywood's most commanding voices stands as a testament to human resilience and transformation. It's a story that seems almost mythical in its arc, the boy who couldn't speak becoming the voice of legends. What makes Jones's accomplishments even more impressive is that he didn't just overcome his speech impediment enough to communicate normally. He developed his voice into an instrument of extraordinary power and nuance. The stutter that once silenced him became the catalyst for a dedicated study of speech that few actors ever undertake. Today, at over 90 years old, Jones remains active in his career, his distinctive voice still immediately recognizable to millions around the world. From his silent years to becoming the voice of Darth Vader, Mufasa, and countless other characters, his journey reminds us that our greatest limitations can sometimes become the foundation for our greatest gifts. I hope you found this story as inspiring as I do. If you've ever felt silenced or limited by circumstances beyond your control, perhaps James Earl Jones's remarkable transformation can serve as a reminder that such limitations need not define your future. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find it inspiring. Until next time, this is your channel name, bringing you unbelievable true stories that challenge and inspire.